There is a war happening in your life. Not the kind with weapons, not the kind you see on the news, not the kind that leaves visible scars. This war is quiet. It happens in conversations, in subtle comments, in raised eyebrows, in silence, in guilt, in approval. And most of the time, you don't even know you're fighting. The most powerful control is the control you don't notice. You think you're making decisions freely. You think your reactions are justified. You think your emotions are yours. But what if they aren't? What if someone knows exactly which button to press? What if a single phrase can shift your mood for an entire day? What if silence from someone you care about can make you question your own worth? That's not weakness. That's psychological influence. And influence becomes control the moment you lose awareness. Most people imagine control as something aggressive, loud, obvious, a dictator, a manipulator, a villain. But real psychological control doesn't look like that. It looks like a friend who says, "I guess I just expected more from you." It looks like a partner who withdraws instead of communicating. It looks like a coworker who plants doubt with a subtle, "Are you sure that's a good idea?" It looks like praise given just enough to keep you attached. No shouting, no threats. Just small emotional shifts, small enough to ignore, strong enough to shape you. And here's the dangerous part. When control is silent, you blame yourself. You think you're overreacting. You think you're too sensitive. You think you're the problem. Confusion is a weapon, and doubt is its ammunition. This audiobook is not about paranoia. It's not about turning you into someone cold or distrustful. It's about awareness. Because once you see the battlefield, you stop fighting blindly. You begin to notice patterns. You notice that certain people leave you drained. You notice that certain conversations always end with you apologizing. You notice that you explain yourself more than necessary. You notice that your mood shifts depending on someone else's approval. That's not coincidence. That's influence. And influence, left unchecked, becomes invisible control. Here's the truth most people avoid. If someone can control your emotions, they can control your behavior. If someone can make you feel guilty on command, they can make you comply. And if someone can trigger your fear of rejection, they can shape your choices. If someone can withdraw affection strategically, they can destabilize your confidence. This isn't dramatic. It's psychological reality. But here's the empowering part. Control only works in the dark. The moment you bring light to it, it weakens. Awareness is power. When you pause instead of reacting, you reclaim authority. When you observe instead of defending, you regain clarity. When you question instead of absorbing, you take back your mind. This silent war is not about defeating others. It's about mastering yourself. You don't need to dominate anyone. You don't need to win arguments. You don't need to expose every manipulator in your life. You need to control your reactions, because the strongest person in the room is not the loudest. It's the one who cannot be emotionally steered. Over the next chapters, so we're going to uncover the invisible battlefield you didn't know you were standing on, the emotional triggers that act like control switches, the subtle tactics people use without even realizing they're using them, the social conditioning that trained you to comply, the addiction to approval that makes you easy to influence, and most importantly, how to reclaim psychological sovereignty. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming calm. It's not about shutting down emotion. Yes, it's about separating emotion from reaction, because there is a space, a small but powerful space, between what you feel and what you choose to do. That space is freedom. Most people live without ever discovering it. They react, they defend, they justify, they comply, and they call it personality. But once you learn to pause, once you learn to observe your own emotional patterns, once you see the strings being pulled, you become difficult to control. Not because you resist everything, but because you choose deliberately. Silent wars are won quietly. No drama, no explosion, just discipline. So as we begin, I want you to listen differently. Not with suspicion, not with fear, but with honesty. Ask yourself, where do I feel pressured? Where do I feel guilt too easily? Where do I over-explain? Where does my mood depend on someone else? Don't judge the answers. Just observe them, because the first victory in any silent war is awareness. And once you see it, you can never be controlled the same way again. Chapter 1. The Invisible Battlefield. There is a reason you don't recognize the war, because it doesn't feel like one. There are no raised voices, no dramatic confrontations, no obvious enemies, just conversations, just relationships, just daily life. And that is exactly why it works. The most effective control never announces itself. It blends into normalcy. Think about the last time you changed your decision because of someone's reaction, not because they forced you, but because of a look, a pause, a tone shift. You felt it instantly. A tightening in your chest, a subtle discomfort, a need to correct yourself. That moment, that subtle internal shift is the battlefield. Not outside you, inside you. Psychological control doesn't require dominance. It requires access to your emotional system, access to your insecurities, access to your need for approval, access to your fear of rejection. When someone has access to those things, they don't need power. They just need timing. Here's how the invisible battlefield works. Step 1. Trigger emotion. Step 2. Create discomfort. Step 3. Offer relief, if you comply. It's subtle. For example, a colleague casually says, "I thought you were more detail-oriented." They smile when they say it. It sounds harmless, but your brain registers threat. Not physical threat, social threat. And the human brain treats social rejection almost like physical pain. Now you're unsettled. You work harder. You over-explain. You seek reassurance. They didn't demand anything. Yet your behavior changed. That's influence. And when influence becomes predictable, it becomes control. Most people don't consciously manipulate others. They've simply learned what works. If guilt works, they use guilt. If silence works, they use silence. If praise works, they use praise strategically. And often, they don't even realize they're doing it. That's what makes silent wars so complex. The battlefield isn't filled with villains. It's filled with unconscious patterns. But unconscious control is still control. You might think, well, isn't all human interaction influence? Yes, but there's a difference between mutual influence and asymmetric control. Mutual influence feels balanced. You can disagree without fear. You can say no without punishment. You can express yourself without walking on eggshells. Control feels different. You hesitate before speaking. You analyze their mood before expressing yours. You adjust yourself preemptively. That anticipation, that constant internal scanning, is a sign you're on the battlefield. Here's something even more important. Control is strongest when it aligns with your identity. If you see yourself as the responsible one, someone can control you by implying you're being irresponsible. If you see yourself as kind, someone can control you by suggesting you're being selfish. Yet if you see yourself as strong, someone can control you by questioning your competence. The attack isn't random. It targets your self-image. Because identity is powerful, and when your identity feels threatened, you react quickly, often irrationally. The invisible battlefield operates through identity threats and emotional triggers. You think you're defending your values, but sometimes you're defending an image, and images are easy to manipulate. Let's go deeper. Why does this work so well? Because humans evolved to survive socially. Thousands of years ago, rejection from the tribe meant danger. Isolation meant vulnerability. So your nervous system is wired to detect social tension, a raised eyebrow, a delayed response, a subtle sigh. Your body reacts before your logic does. That reaction is fast. Control lives in speed. The faster you react, the less conscious you are. The less conscious you are, the easier you are to guide. This is why emotionally reactive people are the easiest to influence. Not because they are weak, but because they respond before they observe. Observation creates distance. Distance creates clarity. Clarity reduces control. When you begin to notice your own internal shifts, something changes. Instead of immediately correcting yourself, you pause. Instead of apologizing instantly, you breathe. Instead of defending, you ask a question. That pause disrupts the battlefield. Because control depends on momentum. Let me give you another example. Imagine someone gives you the silent treatment. No explanation, no communication, just withdrawal. You start analyzing. Did I say something wrong? Are they upset? Should I reach out? The silence creates discomfort. The discomfort pushes you to restore harmony, often at your own expense. But what if you didn't chase? What if you stayed centered? What if you allowed silence to exist without rushing to fix it? Suddenly, soon the tactic loses power. Not because you confronted them, but because you refused to be emotionally stirred. The invisible battlefield is not about fighting others. It's about recognizing when your emotional state is being shaped externally. And the most dangerous illusion is this: believing that your reactions are entirely yours. Many of them are conditioned responses, predictable patterns. If someone knows you hate conflict, they'll use tension. If someone knows you crave validation, they'll give it selectively. And if someone knows you fear abandonment, they'll threaten distance. The battlefield is personalized. That's why awareness must also be personal. Ask yourself, what situations make me react instantly? What tone unsettles me? What type of criticism destabilizes me? Those are entry points. And once you see your entry points, you gain leverage. The goal is not to become emotionless. The goal is to become aware of emotional activation. Because the moment you can say, I feel triggered right now, you are no longer fully inside the trigger, you're observing it. And observation shifts power. Silent wars are rarely loud. They are fought in micro moments, in glances, in tone, in timing. But once you recognize the battlefield, something remarkable happens. You stop reacting automatically. You begin responding intentionally. And that shift from automatic reaction to intentional response is where control starts to dissolve. Because the strongest position in any silent war is not aggression, it's composure. And composure begins with seeing what was once invisible. Chapter 2. Emotional triggers. The control switch, if. Chapter 1 revealed the battlefield. This chapter reveals the switches. Because control rarely begins with logic. It begins with emotion, not big emotion, not dramatic emotion. Small, precise emotional activations. A comment that stings. A tone that shifts. A delayed reply. A comparison. And suddenly, your internal state changes. That change is not random, it is neurological. Your brain is designed to react faster than it thinks. Because when something feels threatening, socially, emotionally, psychologically, your nervous system activates before your reasoning mind has time to analyze. The emotional brain moves first, the logical brain arrives late, and in that small gap, control happens. Let's break this down clearly. Every person has emotional triggers. Now, these are predictable emotional reactions tied to fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being enough, fear of losing status, fear of abandonment. When someone touches one of these fears, even lightly, you react. And most of the time, you react automatically. For example, someone questions your competence in front of others. You feel heat rise in your body. Your heart rate increases. You defend yourself quickly. But notice what just happened. They didn't control you directly. They activated your fear of losing status. Your reaction was self-protective, yet it was triggered externally. Whoever understands your trigger understands your control switch. Imagine emotional triggers like hidden buttons on a control panel. If someone presses guilt, you comply. If someone presses fear, you freeze. If someone presses anger, you explode. If someone presses approval, you chase. The person pressing the button may not even know they're doing it, but the result is predictable. Let's explore the most common emotional switches. First, guilt. Guilt is one of the most powerful tools of psychological control. I guess I just expected you to care more. That sentence doesn't attack you directly. It implies moral failure, and if you see yourself as a good person, you rush to prove it. You overextend. You apologize unnecessarily. You sacrifice your boundaries. And guilt works because it connects to identity. Second, fear. Fear of losing someone. Fear of conflict. Fear of disapproval. When someone subtly threatens distance, withdrawing affection, delaying communication, becoming cold, your nervous system reads danger. You try to restore connection, not because they commanded you, but because your body seeks safety. Third, anger. Anger is explosive. It bypasses reflection. If someone provokes you deliberately, through disrespect, sarcasm, not a challenge, and you react instantly, they have shifted your emotional state. Once emotional, you are less strategic. Emotion narrows perspective. Control loves narrowed perspective. Fourth, validation. This one is subtle. Praise, when given strategically, can become a leash. If someone gives you approval selectively, you begin adjusting behavior to maintain it. You become dependent on their affirmation. Now your internal stability depends on external reinforcement. Dependence reduces freedom. Here's the crucial insight. Emotional triggers are not weaknesses. They are human. But unconscious triggers are vulnerabilities. The difference between being emotional and being controlled is awareness. Let's slow this down. When someone presses a trigger, your body reacts first. You feel tension, heat, tightness, urgency. Most people respond inside that urgency. That is the mistake. Control thrives on speed. And if you can insert even 3 seconds between trigger and response, you disrupt the control loop. 3 seconds. Pause, breathe, observe. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What part of my identity feels threatened? Is this reaction proportional to the situation? This short pause reactivates the rational brain. It brings the prefrontal cortex back online. It restores perspective, and perspective restores power. Let's consider a real-world example. And the manager gives you feedback in a sharp tone. Immediately, you feel defensive. Your mind starts preparing counter-arguments, but instead of reacting, you pause. You notice the feeling, I feel criticized. You breathe, then you respond calmly. Can you clarify what specifically needs improvement? That shift is massive. Instead of defending identity, you seek clarity. You just moved from reaction to strategy, and strategy weakens control. Here's another important layer. Sometimes the trigger isn't created by the other person. It already lives inside you. Unresolved insecurity, past experiences, old conditioning. Someone doesn't create the trigger. They activate it. If you were frequently criticized growing up, criticism now feels amplified. If you experienced emotional withdrawal before, silence now feels threatening. The silent war becomes stronger when your past participates. That's why self-awareness is essential. If you know your trigger, others lose leverage. For example, if you know you are sensitive to being ignored, you can say internally, "This feeling is about my fear of abandonment, not necessarily their intention." That awareness creates emotional separation, and emotional separation reduces control. The goal is not to eliminate triggers. That's impossible. The goal is to recognize activation early. The earlier you recognize it, the less power it has. Imagine this as upgrading from automatic mode to manual mode. Automatic mode, stimulus to reaction. Manual mode, stimulus to awareness to choice. Choice is the difference between being steered and steering yourself. Over time, as you practice pausing, something changes. You become harder to provoke, harder to guilt, harder to emotionally destabilize. Not because you don't feel, but because you feel without surrendering control. Emotional intelligence is not about suppressing emotion, it's about detecting it early. And when you detect it early, you can choose alignment over impulse. Silent wars are not won through aggression. They are won through emotional discipline. Whoever controls your emotional tempo controls your direction. So slow your tempo. Feel fully. Pause deliberately. Respond strategically. Because once you master your emotional switches, no one else can flip them for you. Chapter 3. The power of subtle manipulation. The most dangerous manipulation is not aggressive. It is quiet, polite, reasonable. It doesn't force you, it confuses you. And confusion is one of the most powerful psychological weapons ever used. Because when you are confused, you don't resist. You question yourself. Subtle manipulation works by distorting perception, not reality itself. Your perception of it. It doesn't say, "You're wrong." It makes you wonder if you are. And let's begin with one of the most misunderstood tactics: gaslighting. Gaslighting is not dramatic shouting or obvious lying. It is small denial repeated consistently. That's not what happened. You're overthinking. You're too sensitive. I never said that. One isolated comment is harmless, but repeated over time, something shifts. You start doubting your memory. You second-guess your reactions. You soften your boundaries. The manipulator doesn't need to overpower you. They just need you to distrust yourself. Self-doubt is fertile ground for control. When you no longer trust your perception, you rely on theirs. That's the pivot point. And the most unsettling part, many people who gaslight don't see themselves as manipulators. They see themselves as defending their version of reality. But repetition shapes belief. And if their version becomes dominant, your clarity erodes. Another subtle tactic: passive aggression. Instead of direct disagreement, you get indirect resistance. Sarcasm, delayed responses, cold politeness, backhanded compliments. You're brave for wearing that. I guess some people can handle that responsibility. Nothing openly hostile, but something feels off. That feeling is intentional ambiguity. Ambiguity keeps you unsettled. If they were openly hostile, you could address it. But subtle negativity keeps you guessing. And when you're guessing, you're not grounded. Manipulation often lives in gray areas. This is not black and white. Because gray areas allow denial. If you confront them, they can say, "I didn't mean it like that." Now you're the one overreacting. The battlefield shifts. Let's look at another tactic: strategic silence. Silence can be healthy, but silence used to punish is control. The silent treatment is not communication, it's emotional withdrawal. And emotional withdrawal triggers insecurity. Humans are wired for connection. When connection disappears suddenly, your nervous system activates. You try to restore it. You apologize. You reach out first. You smooth things over, even if you did nothing wrong. That's leverage. Silence creates tension. Tension pressures you to move. The manipulator doesn't need to speak. Your discomfort does the work for them. Another powerful tactic, selective validation. This one is subtle and addictive. Imagine someone who praises you occasionally, but unpredictably. Sometimes warm, sometimes distant. That unpredictability creates emotional dependence. It mirrors the psychology of intermittent reinforcement. When reward is inconsistent, attachment intensifies. You work harder to regain approval. You adjust behavior unconsciously. Not because you're commanded, but because your brain seeks the reward. Approval becomes currency, and whoever controls the currency controls behavior. Now, let's talk about social triangulation. This happens when someone brings a third person into a dynamic indirectly. Other people think you're too intense. Everyone noticed you were quiet. Whether true or not is irrelevant. The suggestion creates social pressure. It activates fear of exclusion. Now you're not just responding to one person, you're responding to an imagined group. And imagined judgment can be even stronger than direct criticism. Subtle manipulation rarely attacks directly. It surrounds, it suggests, it implies, it nudges. Here's what makes subtle manipulation effective. It preserves plausible deniability. The manipulator can always say, "You misunderstood. You're being dramatic. That's not what I meant." And because it's subtle, you hesitate to challenge it. You don't want to escalate something small, but small patterns repeated become structural control. The question is, why do we fall for it? Because we want harmony, we want connection, we want stability, we want to be seen as reasonable. And manipulation exploits your desire to maintain peace. It makes you carry emotional responsibility for both sides. You start thinking, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I should just let it go. Maybe I should adjust. And sometimes adjusting is healthy, but constant adjusting erodes identity. If you consistently minimize your perception to maintain harmony, you lose internal alignment. The antidote to subtle manipulation is clarity, not aggression. Clarity. Clarity sounds like that comment felt dismissive. Can you clarify what you meant? When you withdraw like that, I feel uncertain. Is something wrong? I remember the conversation differently. Let's revisit it calmly. Notice the tone. Not emotional, not accusatory. Firm, grounded. Manipulation thrives in emotional chaos. It weakens in calm confrontation. Another key defense is documentation. Internally. Track patterns. Is this isolated or repeated? Subtle manipulation depends on repetition. That if something makes you uncomfortable repeatedly, it's not random, it's a pattern, and patterns deserve attention. Here is the most important shift. Trust your internal signal before you trust external denial. If something consistently feels destabilizing, explore that feeling, not with paranoia, with curiosity. Ask, what exactly felt off? Was it tone, timing, context? Is this consistent? Clarity builds strength, and strength reduces manipulability. Silent wars are rarely loud. They are fought in tone, timing, and implication. But once you recognize subtle manipulation, it loses mystery. And once it loses mystery, it loses momentum. Because manipulation requires fog, and awareness clears the air. When you stop questioning your sanity and start questioning patterns, the battlefield shifts, and subtle control begins to weaken. Chapter 4. Social Conditioning and Invisible Scripts. Before anyone learned how to control you, you were trained. Not maliciously, not intentionally, but systematically. From childhood, you absorbed invisible scripts. Scripts about who you should be, how you should behave, when you should speak, when you should stay quiet. These scripts shape your identity long before you realize you have one. And once identity is shaped, it becomes predictable. Predictable people are easier to influence. Let's start with something simple. If you were praised for being the good one, you learned that harmony equals safety. If you were praised for being strong, you learned that vulnerability equals weakness. If you were labeled difficult, you learned that self-expression equals rejection. None of this was evil. It was conditioning. But conditioning creates reflexes, and reflexes can be exploited. Social conditioning works by embedding expectations into your nervous system. And you don't consciously think, "I must not disappoint." You feel it, a subtle tightening, a quiet pressure, an internal voice saying, "Don't cause problems." That voice might not even be yours. It might be inherited from parents, from teachers, from culture, from early social experiences. The invisible script might say, "Good people sacrifice. Strong people don't complain. Kind people forgive quickly. Responsible people say yes. Successful people don't show doubt." And each script sounds positive, but when rigid, it becomes a lever. Imagine someone who deeply believes good people always help. Now imagine a manipulative person in their life. They don't need to threaten, they just imply disappointment. "Wow, I thought you were someone I could count on." That's it. The script activates, the conditioned identity takes over, and compliance follows. The manipulator didn't create the script, they just read it. The more rigid your internal rules, and the easier you are to predict, and predictability reduces autonomy. Let's examine one of the most common scripts, the nice person identity. Being kind is healthy, but being unable to tolerate disapproval is not. Many people were conditioned to equate conflict with danger, so they avoid it at all costs. They over-explain, they over-apologize, they agree when they want to disagree. They believe they are being mature, but often they are being conditioned. If someone senses you avoid conflict, and they can pressure you through tension alone, a raised tone, a sigh, a subtle shift in mood, you adjust immediately. Not because you're weak, because you were trained to maintain peace. Here's another script, the independent one. You were told to handle everything alone. So now, when someone withdraws support, you don't protest, you internalize. You tell yourself, "I shouldn't need them anyway." But emotional suppression is still a reaction, and people who suppress often become targets of silent emotional pressure because they won't voice discomfort. Now let's zoom out further. Society itself rewards compliance. In school, you are praised for following instructions. In workplaces, you are rewarded for fitting culture. In social groups, belonging often requires alignment. Over time, you learn approval equals safety, disapproval equals risk. So when someone subtly threatens approval, your system reacts. It's not weakness. No, it's survival wiring shaped by years of reinforcement. Here's the deeper truth. You don't just react to individuals, you react to what they represent: authority, rejection, status, belonging. If someone resembles an authority figure from your past, their criticism may hit harder. If someone resembles a rejecting parent, their silence may feel amplified. Your current battlefield often echoes older environments. And without awareness, you fight old battles in new relationships. See, that's how conditioning sustains control. You think you're responding to the present, but you're reacting from the past. Invisible scripts are powerful because they feel moral, they feel right. But rigid morality can be weaponized. If you believe, "I must always be understanding," someone can constantly demand understanding from you while offering none in return. If you believe, "I must always take responsibility," someone can subtly shift blame onto you repeatedly. And because it aligns with your identity, you accept it. This is not about abandoning values. It's about loosening rigidity. Flexible identity reduces control. When you can say, "I value kindness, but I also value boundaries. You disrupt the script. When you can say, I value strength, but I allow vulnerability, you reduce predictability. The more balanced your identity, the harder you are to manipulate. Here's a powerful reflection exercise. Finish these sentences honestly. I must always. I should never. People like me don't, Yaka. If I disappoint someone, it means. These answers reveal scripts, not truths. Scripts, and scripts can be rewritten. Control weakens when identity becomes conscious, because then you choose who you are, instead of performing who you were shaped to be. The goal is not rebellion, it's sovereignty. You don't need to reject society. You need to recognize where conditioning overrides choice. When you catch yourself saying yes automatically, pause. When you feel guilt immediately, pause. When you assume you are wrong before verifying, pause. That pause allows identity to shift from reflex to decision. And once identity becomes conscious, influence becomes negotiable. Silent wars are not only fought between people, they are fought between your present awareness and your past programming. The stronger your awareness, the weaker the script. And when scripts loosen, control loses its foundation. Chapter 5. Approval Addiction. There is a form of control that feels good. That's why it's so powerful. It doesn't hurt you immediately. It doesn't intimidate you. It rewards you. Approval, a smile, a compliment, a nod of validation, a message that says, I'm proud of you. Nothing feels threatening about it. But when your emotional stability depends on it, approval becomes leverage. Let's be clear. Wanting approval is human. We are social beings. Belonging feels safe. Recognition feels meaningful. Praise feels energizing. The problem begins when approval shifts from appreciation to necessity. When you need validation to feel stable, you surrender autonomy. Approval addiction does not look dramatic. It looks like subtle adjustment. You soften opinions to be liked. You hide disagreement to avoid tension. You check your phone repeatedly for reassurance. You replay conversations to ensure you are accepted. Externally, you seem composed. Internally, you are scanning for signals. This constant scanning is not confidence, it is dependence. Approval addiction often begins early. If praise was conditional growing up, given when you performed well, behaved correctly, or met expectations, your nervous system may have learned love must be earned. And if love must be earned, it can be withdrawn. That belief creates vigilance. You monitor reactions, you anticipate disappointment, you overcorrect behavior, not because someone demanded it, but because losing approval feels like losing safety. Here's where silent wars exploit this. If someone senses that you crave validation, they don't need to criticize you harshly. They just need to withhold praise occasionally. They become warm when you align, cool when you don't. This inconsistency creates tension, and tension drives compliance. You begin adjusting unconsciously to regain warmth. It's subtle, but powerful. Approval becomes currency, and whoever controls the currency influences the transaction. Let's go deeper. Approval addiction is tied to external identity. If your self-worth is externally anchored, it fluctuates based on response. Positive feedback leads to confidence rises. Neutral reaction leads to doubt creeps in. Disapproval leads to identity shakes. This volatility makes you easier to steer because your internal state is externally regulated. Strong autonomy requires internal validation. That doesn't mean ignoring feedback, and it means your sense of worth doesn't collapse when feedback shifts. Let's examine how approval addiction shows up in adult life. In relationships, you avoid bringing up issues because you don't want to ruin the mood. You laugh at jokes that make you uncomfortable. You downplay needs so you won't seem difficult. In the workplace, you overwork to secure recognition. You hesitate to challenge ideas from higher-ups. You apologize for taking space. Nice in social circles, you mirror opinions to blend in. You fear being seen as intense or different. You monitor how often you're included. None of these behaviors are dramatic, but repeated over time, they shape your identity. You become adaptable, pleasant, agreeable, and quietly disconnected from yourself. Approval addiction often disguises itself as kindness, but true kindness does not require self-erasure. If you constantly prioritize being liked over being aligned, you create internal fragmentation. Fragmentation weakens clarity, and clarity is protection against manipulation. Here's the deeper psychological layer. Approval activates reward circuitry in the brain. Recognition triggers dopamine release. Dopamine reinforces behavior. So if approval feels good, you naturally repeat behaviors that earn it. There's nothing wrong with that, until someone uses it strategically. If approval is predictable, it stabilizes you. If approval is unpredictable, it hooks you. Intermittent validation creates stronger attachment than consistent validation. Why? Because uncertainty intensifies focus. You pay more attention to unpredictable reward. That's why approval addiction can feel like obsession. You think more about the person who validates inconsistently than the one who validates steadily. Your brain is trying to solve the unpredictability, and while you're trying to solve it, you're adjusting. That adjustment is subtle compliance. So what's the solution? It is not becoming indifferent to feedback. It is building internal reference. Ask yourself, if no one reacted to this decision, would I still make it? If no one praised this action, would I still feel aligned? If someone disapproved, would I still stand firm? These questions test autonomy. Autonomy is not rebellion, it is stability. When approval becomes a bonus, not a requirement, you shift power. You still appreciate praise, but you don't depend on it. You still value connection, but you don't chase it. This is where many silent wars collapse. Because if someone cannot regulate you through approval, they lose a major lever. Approval addiction makes you emotionally negotiable. Internal validation makes you emotionally anchored. Anchored people are harder to manipulate. They listen, they reflect, they adjust when necessary. But they do not contort for acceptance. Here's a powerful shift. Instead of asking, "Do they approve of me?" ask, "Do I approve of my behavior?" Instead of scanning for applause, scan for alignment. And alignment builds calm. Calm reduces reactivity. Reduced reactivity weakens control. Silent wars are not won by seeking validation. They are won by quiet self-trust. When your identity is internally anchored, approval becomes pleasant, not powerful. And once approval loses power over you, manipulation loses one of its most effective tools. Chapter 6. Silence as Strategy. In silent wars, the most powerful move is often the one you don't make. Silence is misunderstood. Many people associate silence with weakness, with avoidance, with fear. But strategic silence is not withdrawal, it is control. Let's clarify something important. There is reactive silence, and there is deliberate silence. Reactive silence is when you shut down because you feel overwhelmed. Deliberate silence is when you pause because you choose not to react. The difference is internal. In silent wars, reaction is fuel. Every visible emotional spike gives information. Anger reveals your trigger. Defensiveness reveals your insecurity. Over-explaining reveals your need for approval. The moment you react emotionally, you expose leverage. But when you remain composed, you remove data. Silence disrupts emotional momentum. Imagine someone trying to provoke you. They make a sarcastic remark. They challenge your competence. They test your boundary. They expect movement. They expect defense or anger or apology. Instead, you pause. You hold eye contact, you breathe, and you respond slowly or not at all. The emotional current they try to create has nowhere to flow. Momentum collapses. Silence forces clarity. When you do not immediately react, the other person becomes aware of their own behavior. Many subtle manipulations depend on speed. A quick jab, a quick shift, a quick withdrawal. They rely on you reacting before you think. Silence interrupts that speed. It widens the gap between stimulus and response. That gap is power. Let's explore how silence functions strategically. First, silence protects your emotional data. If someone criticizes you and you instantly defend yourself, they now know criticism destabilizes you. If someone withdraws and you immediately chase, they now know distance unsettles you. But if you pause, if you do not react immediately, you observe instead, you gather information. Silence shifts you from participant to observer. Observers see patterns. Participants get caught in them. Second, silence regulates your nervous system. When you feel triggered, your body activates quickly. Heart rate increases. Muscles tighten. Thoughts narrow. If you speak immediately in that state, you speak from activation. Silence allows de-escalation. It gives your physiology time to stabilize, and a regulated nervous system makes better decisions. This is not passivity. It is discipline. Third, silence removes reinforcement. If someone uses sarcasm to provoke a reaction, and you give them visible frustration, their tactic worked. Even negative reaction can reinforce behavior. But if sarcasm meets composure, it often fades. Because manipulation seeks effect. When effect disappears, strategy weakens. Now, silence must be used carefully. Strategic silence is not avoidance. It is not ignoring necessary communication. It is not suppressing emotion permanently. And it is choosing timing. For example, someone says something dismissive in a group setting. Instead of confronting immediately from emotion, you note it. Later, calmly, you address it privately. When you made that comment earlier, it felt dismissive. Was that your intention? Notice the sequence. Pause first. Address second. Silence gave space for clarity. Another powerful use of silence is in negotiation. If someone makes a demand, most people rush to fill the gap. They justify, they explain. They concede too quickly, but silence after an offer creates pressure. The one who speaks first often adjusts. Silence forces others to sit with their words. It exposes overreach. It reveals discomfort. In social dynamics, silence also signals emotional stability. When someone cannot provoke you easily, they recalibrate. Calm presence changes hierarchy, not through dominance, through self-regulation. There is a concept worth understanding: emotional tempo. Some people try to accelerate interactions. They push urgency. They push intensity. They push immediate resolution. If you match their tempo automatically, they lead the rhythm. But if you slow down intentionally, you reclaim it. Silence slows tempo. Slower tempo increases thoughtfulness. Thoughtfulness increases autonomy. Let's examine a common scenario. You send a message. They don't reply immediately. Anxiety rises. You consider sending another message. This is where silence becomes strategy. Instead of chasing reassurance, you sit with discomfort. You allow space. You refuse to let urgency dictate action. That restraint builds internal strength, and internal strength reduces manipulability. The strongest individuals in silent wars are not the most aggressive. They are the most composed. They do not react to every stimulus. They do not fill every silence. They do not defend every accusation. They choose when to engage. Silence also reveals character. When you stop over-explaining, you see who respects your boundary. When you stop chasing, you see who steps forward. When you stop reacting, you see who escalates. Silence becomes diagnostic. It shows you where pressure exists and where respect does not. But remember this: silence is only powerful when grounded. If you are silent out of fear, it weakens you. If you are silent out of awareness, it strengthens you. The internal difference is confidence. Confidence says, "I do not need to react to prove my worth." In silent wars, your greatest weapon is not aggression. It is control of tempo, control of reaction, control of emotional exposure. Silence is not emptiness, it is space. And in that space, clarity grows. When you master silence strategically, you become unpredictable, not erratic. Calmly unpredictable. And unpredictable individuals are difficult to control, because control relies on predictable reaction. Remove predictable reaction, and the battlefield shifts. Chapter 7. Reclaiming Psychological Sovereignty. Awareness protects you, but sovereignty empowers you. Up until now, we've exposed the battlefield, we've identified the switches, we've examined manipulation, we've dismantled conditioning, we've weakened approval addiction, we've mastered silence. Now comes the shift. Not just resisting control, reclaiming authority. Psychological sovereignty is the ability to govern your inner state independently of external pressure. It means your reactions are chosen, your boundaries are deliberate, your identity is internally anchored. Sovereignty does not mean isolation, it means autonomy within connection. Let's define it clearly. If someone criticizes you and you collapse emotionally, you lack sovereignty. If someone praises you and your confidence skyrockets uncontrollably, you lack sovereignty. If someone withdraws and your stability shakes, you lack sovereignty. Sovereignty is stability across fluctuation, and it is emotional self-governance. And self-governance begins with one fundamental shift, from reaction to response. Reaction is automatic. Response is intentional. Reaction is fast. Response is measured. Reaction is driven by triggers. Response is guided by values. To reclaim sovereignty, you must first accept something uncomfortable. No one can control you without your nervous system participating. This is not blame. It is empowerment. If your system participates, your system can change. So let's explore the pillars of psychological sovereignty. First, internal validation. Approval no longer determines identity. You evaluate yourself based on alignment, not applause. Ask daily, did I act in integrity? Did I respect my boundaries? Did I respond intentionally? If yes, you remain steady, regardless of external reaction. Second, emotional regulation. Sovereign individuals feel deeply, but they are not ruled by feelings. Emotion informs them. It does not command them. When triggered, so as they pause. When praised, they stay grounded. When criticized, they assess calmly. They are neither inflated nor deflated easily. Third, clear boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They are guidelines for interaction. Without boundaries, others test your limits unconsciously. With boundaries, dynamics clarify. Boundaries sound like, I'm not comfortable with that. I need time to think. I disagree. That doesn't work for me. Notice the tone. Not aggressive, not apologetic, not neutral and firm. Many people fear boundaries because they fear rejection. But boundaries do not create rejection. They reveal compatibility. If someone withdraws because you expressed a need, that withdrawal was conditional from the beginning. Sovereignty requires tolerance for disapproval. This is where many falter. To remain sovereign, you must be willing to be misunderstood. You must be willing to not be universally liked, because universal approval requires self-editing. These constant self-editing fractures identity. Fourth, ownership of tempo. You no longer match emotional intensity automatically. If someone escalates, you slow down. If someone pressures, you create space. You do not allow urgency to override clarity. This shifts power quietly. Power is not loudness. Power is composure under pressure. Fifth, selective engagement. Sovereign individuals do not respond to every challenge. They choose their battles. Not every comment requires defense. Not every provocation requires correction. Sometimes the most powerful move is non-participation. Non-participation is not weakness. It is strategic filtering. You decide where your energy goes. Energy is limited. Sovereignty means investing it intentionally. Let's examine what changes internally when sovereignty grows. You stop over-explaining. You stop seeking reassurance repeatedly. You stop interpreting every silence as rejection. You stop absorbing blame automatically. Thus, you stop performing for validation. Instead, you observe, you evaluate, you decide. Externally, you may appear calmer. Internally, you are more stable. And stability disrupts manipulation, because manipulation depends on volatility. If someone cannot destabilize you emotionally, their leverage decreases. Let's imagine a situation. Someone tries to guilt you. Instead of apologizing instantly, you say, "I understand you're disappointed. I'm not available for that." No justification. So no defensive explanation, just clarity. They may push further, but if you remain steady, the dynamic shifts. Over time, people recalibrate around sovereign individuals, not because they dominate, because they are consistent. Consistency builds quiet authority. Here is the paradox. The less you try to control others, the more control you gain over yourself. And self-control radiates influence naturally. Psychological sovereignty is not about winning arguments. It is about not losing yourself. In silent wars, many battles are unnecessary. You only need to win one. Control of your internal state. Once you master that, external pressure loses weight. Because your worth is not negotiable, your identity is not fragile, your reaction is not automatic. You become emotionally self-contained, not detached. Contained. There is strength in containment. When others sense you cannot be easily swayed, they adjust behavior. Not because you demanded it, but because unstable tactics fail against stable minds. Sovereignty is not a single decision. It is daily discipline. Pause before reacting. Speak with intention. Set boundaries calmly. Release the need to convince everyone. Remain aligned with your values. Over time, something shifts. You stop feeling like the battlefield. You become the anchor. And anchored individuals are difficult to control. Because control requires movement, and sovereignty creates stillness. Chapter 8. Becoming uncontrollable. There is a quiet shift that happens when someone can no longer move you emotionally. It is not dramatic. There is no announcement, no confrontation, no visible transformation, but something changes. You stop reacting automatically. You stop chasing reassurance. You stop defending every misunderstanding. You stop adjusting to maintain comfort for others. And slowly, almost invisibly, you become uncontrollable. Becoming uncontrollable does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean becoming distant, aggressive, or detached. It means becoming internally anchored. It means your emotional state is no longer easily outsourced. Most people can be steered by approval, steered by fear, steered by guilt, steered by silence. Not because they are weak, because they are unaware. But once awareness turns into discipline, control mechanisms begin to fail. Let's define what uncontrollable truly means. An uncontrollable person cannot be provoked into losing composure easily. They cannot be guilted into abandoning their boundaries. They cannot be flattered into surrendering their judgment. They cannot be pressured into immediate decisions. They feel everything, but they choose carefully. There is power in that restraint. Consider this. If someone insults you and you erupt, they influenced you. If someone ignores you and you panic, they influenced you. And if someone praises you and you overcommit, they influenced you. Influence is not the enemy. Unconscious influence is. Becoming uncontrollable means influence passes through you without hijacking you. It touches, but it does not steer. The foundation of this state is self-trust. Not ego, self-trust. You trust your perception enough to examine it calmly. You trust your boundaries enough to maintain them. You trust your worth enough not to beg for confirmation. Self-trust eliminates desperation, and in desperation is the easiest leverage point in silent war. There is another element, emotional neutrality under pressure, not emotional emptiness. Neutrality. When someone tries to escalate intensity, you remain measured. When someone tests your limit, you respond without hostility. When someone attempts to destabilize you, you slow down further. You refuse to match chaos, and chaos cannot grip what does not move. Becoming uncontrollable also requires tolerance for discomfort. Because once you stop complying automatically, there will be resistance. People who are used to steering you may push harder. They may increase guilt, increase pressure, increase provocation. This is not proof you are wrong. It is proof the dynamic is shifting, and dynamics resist change before they recalibrate. If you remain steady through that transition, new equilibrium forms. A stronger one. Here's a critical truth. When you stop over-explaining, some people will feel excluded. When you stop chasing, some people will feel ignored. When you stop reacting, some people will feel challenged. That is not your responsibility. You are not required to remain emotionally accessible to manipulation. Becoming uncontrollable also means accepting selective connection. Not everyone can meet you at a sovereign level. Some relationships depend on imbalance. When imbalance disappears, so does the connection. This can feel like loss, but often it is refinement. You are not losing people. You are losing unhealthy leverage. There is a calm confidence that emerges in uncontrollable individuals. They do not rush to defend themselves. They do not rush to prove their intelligence. They do not rush to secure approval. They listen, they observe, they speak deliberately. And silence no longer feels threatening, because their stability is not external, it is internal. Imagine entering a room without scanning for judgment. Imagine hearing criticism without collapsing. Imagine experiencing distance without chasing. Imagine disagreement without emotional rupture. This is psychological freedom. And freedom is not loud, it is quiet. It shows up in posture, in tone, in eye contact, in pacing. Uncontrollable individuals move slowly in a fast world. They choose carefully in a reactive culture. They respond intentionally in chaotic environments. And because of that, their presence shifts rooms. Not through dominance, but through stability. Stability is magnetic. It commands respect without demanding it. Here is the final shift. Stop trying to control others. Focus exclusively on controlling your internal state. Because when you master yourself, external manipulation weakens automatically. Control thrives on reaction. Remove predictable reaction. And control loses structure. The ultimate victory in silent wars is not defeating someone. It is becoming unsteerable. When your emotions are felt but not hijacked, when your boundaries are clear but not aggressive, when your identity is firm but flexible, you move differently. You walk into conversations without armor. You speak without fear of collapse. You listen without defensiveness. You leave without resentment. That is sovereignty embodied, and once embodied, it cannot be taken, because it does not depend on permission. It does not depend on praise. It does not depend on agreement. It depends only on discipline. Discipline of pause, discipline of self-reflection, discipline of emotional regulation. Becoming uncontrollable is not a moment, it is a practice. daily, quietly, intentionally. And over time, people stop trying to push. Because they sense resistance is useless. You're no longer reactive terrain. You are stable ground. And stable ground cannot be moved easily. Silent wars are still happening around you, but you are no longer fighting blindly. Yes, you are no longer absorbing every impact. You are no longer adjusting automatically. You are steady. And steady minds are the hardest to control. There is one more truth about becoming uncontrollable. It is not about perfection. You will still feel anger. You will still feel hurt. You will still feel disappointment. But the difference is this. Your emotions will no longer own you. They will pass through you like weather, and weather does not define the sky. When someone tries to provoke you and you remain composed, something subtle happens inside them. They lose footing because provocation depends on predictable reaction. When reaction disappears, uncertainty appears, and uncertainty makes manipulation unstable. Over time, people adjust their behavior around those who cannot be emotionally steered, not because they are afraid, but because the usual tactics stop working. And here's the quiet irony. When you become uncontrollable, you also become more trustworthy. Why? Because people know you are not reacting impulsively. They know your words are chosen. They know your boundaries are consistent. Consistency builds quiet authority, and quiet authority commands respect more effectively than force ever could. You do not need to announce your strength. You demonstrate it through restraint. You do not need to dominate conversations. You influence through stability, and perhaps the most powerful outcome of all, peace. When you are no longer scanning for approval, no longer bracing for emotional swings, no longer adjusting to avoid tension, your nervous system rests. You sleep differently. You think more clearly. You move through the world without internal turbulence. That is the reward of sovereignty. Not superiority, not power over others, but freedom within yourself. Becoming uncontrollable is not about being unreachable. It is about being grounded. Grounded enough that external storms do not uproot you. Grounded enough that silence does not scare you. Grounded enough that criticism does not collapse you. And once you reach that state, you're no longer fighting silent wars. You are simply walking through them. Untouched, unmoved, uncontrolled. If you've stayed with this audiobook until now, something inside you already understands. You've seen the battlefield, you've recognized the triggers, you've identified the scripts, you've felt the pull of approval, you've understood the power of silence, and most importantly, you've discovered that control only works when you move unconsciously. This entire journey was not about exposing villains, it was about exposing patterns, because the greatest silent war is not between you and someone else. It is between your awareness and your impulses. And today, awareness wins. But here is something important. Insight without practice fades. You cannot listen to discipline once and expect sovereignty forever. Sovereignty is trained, not declared. So here is your challenge. For the next 72 hours, practice 3 things. First, pause before reacting. When someone says something that activates you, do not respond immediately. Breathe. Even 3 seconds changes the outcome. Feel the emotion. Name it internally. Then decide. Second, identify one pattern. Notice where you tend to over-explain, over-apologize, or over-adjust. Don't judge it. Just observe it. Awareness weakens repetition. Third, set one boundary. Not aggressively. Not dramatically. Simply, clearly. It could be as small as, I need time to think about that. Or, that doesn't work for me. Small boundaries build strong foundations. If you do this consistently, something remarkable will happen. Your emotional volatility will decrease. Your confidence will stabilize. Your reactions will slow. And people will start responding to you differently. Not because you demanded respect, but because your energy shifted. When you no longer chase approval, approval loses leverage. When you no longer react predictably, manipulation loses direction. When you no longer collapse under tension, pressure loses force. The truth is simple. Control depends on your participation. Withdraw unconscious participation, and the silent war weakens. But remember this. This is not about becoming untouchable. It's about becoming grounded. You will still feel, you will still care, you will still connect, but you will not be steered. There is a difference, and that difference changes everything. Most people move through life reacting. Few move through life choosing. Be one of the few. Let your silence be intentional. Let your boundaries be calm. Let your emotions inform you, but never own you. And when someone tries to pull you into drama, guilt, fear, or validation games, smile internally. Slow down, observe, and remain steady. Because steady minds are difficult to control. If this message resonated with you, don't just keep it to yourself. So share it with someone who needs to reclaim their inner authority. Someone who is tired of being emotionally steered. Someone who is ready to stop reacting and start governing themselves. And if you're committed to building psychological strength, emotional discipline, and true self-mastery, subscribe. Not for motivation, but for transformation. This channel is not about hype, it's about sovereignty. You are not here to dominate others, you are here to master yourself. And then once you master yourself, silent wars lose their power. Walk calmly, think clearly, respond deliberately. And remember, the most powerful person in the room is the one who cannot be emotionally moved against their will. I'll see you in the next one.